You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Listening to the Bells of Liberty podcast, where freedom rings and the sassiness stings. Stay tuned for a little bit of sassy freedom. Hello and welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. In case you missed us last week, we're so glad you're here with us again. We all had some pretty heavy things come up, and we thought it was a good idea to skip a week and come back with what we hope is a better show for you all. Obviously, this week had no shortage of things to talk about. First and foremost being the shooting in the Capitol on Monday. Some new things, some new information have come up in even just the last 24 hours, and we think it's an important story to discuss, considering even this near massacre has been politicized and has become utterly frustrating to watch unfold. Progressives have shown on many occasions that nothing is too far, including, apparently, constantly rioting an 11-year-old because his dad happens to be a Trump. And this week was no different. We will continue our constitutorial with Article 3 and a brand spanking new Ring the Bell. So let's get started with the Capitol shooting. Take it away, Courtney.
Kind of wish I could, but it's here to stay for a little while, unfortunately. So by now, everybody knows, I think probably like most of the Western Hemisphere and beyond knows about the Capitol shooting. Casey, I believe, is still in critical condition, hoping and praying that things will turn out for the best and he'll have a full recovery on that. So some things to come out of this. I didn't want to talk about this at first because I've just been kind of burned out on how not just politics, but just everything right now is so on the outrage meter, it's to 11. And I've gotten really frustrated. And I just I feel like I want some downtime, but things just keep coming at you. And then we have this thing come at you. I was glad to be able to sit and process it, to be able to go through this story in a way that really made me think about what was so frustrating instead of just saying, I'm outraged about this. So some points that I came up with while I was processing this was the most frustrating things was that there's a narrative of hate that is continuing in all of this. Politics, I don't care what side you're on. They did not cause this shooting. The left expects the right to roll over on Second Amendment rights. The demeaning of the hero that went to save lives that day, reducing her to a label. The left, I'm reading stuff from Slate and Salon that the left is worried that the right, because of this, will actually start cracking down on First Amendment rights. And then there's also the culture of death. So there's a lot of points to get through on this. And so I guess we'll try to go as fast as we can. But the first point I wanted to bring up was the demeaning of the hero. I forget her name. Gosh darn it. The police officer who ran to the aid of those who were being shot. And now the big talking point for her is she's lesbian and she's black. And that's what she's been reduced to. And it really bothered me because she is more than that. And when you sign up to become a cop, you don't sign up under all these labels. You sign up under an ethic. And that's what she signed up under. And to reduce her to labels is saying that she doesn't have enough character to get by. So I know, what do you guys think about that? That's my first point.
Well, obviously it's irritating because why can't she just be brave and heroic why does it have to be something that the left champions, like being a lesbian? Like, what did that have to do with her going and saving someone's life?
Well, and what does that support? I mean, if it's her job to protect this man, regardless of what his thought process is, because that's her job. But I'm sure they would be applauding had she been like, well, he voted against gay marriage, so I don't really care if he takes a bullet or 5 or dies. You know, like, I feel like they would be applauding that because she would have been well within her rights to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a justification in there somewhere for certain behaviors.
Yeah.
And kind of just goes along with the theme that we've seen a lot of people who thought that any survivors from this was not a good thing. That the Republican Party or people who happen to identify as Republican are just asking for it, and that it's okay, you know, that they were actually kind of celebrating that it happened because they deserved it and were asking for it this whole time. So I think it kind of goes along that same vein. And I think that, I don't know, I haven't been impressed with how people have been handling this, to be totally honest, because it shouldn't be about politics. Maybe the motivations for the man doing what he did was politics, which is really crappy, but our response should be more than that. It should be that these people, whether they're politicians you like or don't like, they're still human beings, and they don't deserve to be essentially, you know, attempted murder or murdered because someone doesn't like their politics. That's not how this works, and that's not how it should ever work. And I think that's what's been most frustrating to me, is that we should be leaving all of that at the door and feeling for the man who was shot so badly, because a lot of people are like, oh, he just got shot in the hip. And it's like, yeah, he got shot in the hip. And do you know what happens with bullets when they hit bone? They ricochet. Okay? They bounce around and they hit important parts. So even though it came in through the hip, the man is in critical condition because it tore up his insides. And he's not just the majority whip to the Republican Party. He is a husband and a father, and he's got 2 little kids that can't be more than, I don't know, like 8 and maybe 12. And, you know, they could have easily lost their dad because some nut job decided because their dad is a Republican and has a certain job that he had the right to take his life. So that is what we should be focusing on, and I think we miss that when we look at it from the perspective of, were they Democrat or were they Republican? And who should we care about more?
I was just going to add on to what Jane is saying. Like, there's always this thing where now it's like almost reactive. As soon as something happens, it's like, well, let's not make this about politics, you know? And then it's all politics. It's always all politics. But they just want to say, I'm going to take a break from politics, and then I'm going to say what I was already going to say. Like, there's no pause. There's no break. There's no moment for anyone to breathe and just be a human being for 10 seconds.
Well, and I'll admit that even I say that like I have some like moral high ground, but even when I hear these things happen, I think because politics is so ingrained in everybody's lives these days that like there's no escape from it, that the first thing that popped into my head, unfortunately, was, well, was he liberal? Was he a progressive? Like, that was the first thing that came to my mind, and I'm kind of sorry that that's the truth, but at the same time, was I wrong? I mean, it's hard to turn it off. So I do see where people are coming from, but at the same time, like, my second thought was, okay, we should probably focus on the fact that someone was mortally injured, you know, that people were shot, people were almost killed, and that they're still people, you know, it's not like just because you happen to work in the government, no matter how much I detest them, if these had been liberals or progressives, I still would have felt bad about that. You know, I personally would have felt for them too if it had been the opposite way around, and I would have condemned the guy if it was a Republican shooting Democrats. So I don't know. Exactly. I feel a little bit better because at least I had that second thought, but I do see where people's brains immediately go, because a lot of times, because it happens so frequently and because we talk about it so much, and it's like part of everybody's lives because there's no escaping it in anything that you do anymore. I mean, you can't even go to the movies without it being some sort of political issue that you either roll your eyes or you're like, woohoo, about. Yeah. So unfortunately that was my first thought, but I just think people forget about that, and that's really disturbing. And what's even more disturbing, I think, is the media's response to the things that they're discovering as more information comes out from this whole thing. Like, I just got my oil changed for my car today, and I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for it to get done, and they had, of course, ABC running. So I'm like, okay, like sitting there, and it was just like story after story after story of like, I'm just sitting there rocking, just trying to keep myself sane because it's in my face. Because it's not something I would typically watch. And they got to a story about the shooting. And what they've discovered today, or at least they've released, is that the shooter, and Hodgkinson, I think is his name. It doesn't really matter what his name is. He shouldn't be remembered for this anyway. But had a list of Republican congressmen's names in his pocket. And I feel like anybody who has an ounce of intelligence, or maybe even has a couple brain cells to rub together, might take that as these are the people he was intentionally trying to shoot. Were they on the field that day?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think that's too far of a stretch. They actually said in this report that no one should make an assumption of what it means that this man had a list of Republican congressmen's names in his pocket.
It is so ridiculous. Like, I understand where they're going with it, but at the same time, it's like, yeah. So, another point that, we're talking about a little bit is that the politics didn't cause this, and that's been a frustrating point. This guy latched on to politics. Like, it's clear that he was unstable to begin with, okay? But he latched on to politics as a mechanism to move, like, to just deal with his unstableness and stuff. So on the right, I can recognize it, like, politics didn't cause it, but like, you see some of these tweets from this, there's this one guy, James Devine. He writes, we're in war with selfish, foolish, and narcissistic rich people. Why is it a shock when things turn violent? And he used the hashtag Hunt Republican Congressman.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't okay, so we've got freedom of speech, okay? You literally can say almost anything you want to say and not be jailed for it, like, in theory, okay? And that's something else I want to talk about later. What's the line between inciting violence and freedom of speech? But this guy here, like, I think that if you are in a position of any sort, like, you have crazy people who latch onto you and want to do something to get your attention. I'm a nobody. Nobody's going to do some violent crime in my name, okay? Because I'm nobody. But you've got people who are in the news. You've got people who are celebrities. You've got these people who make careless and rash tweets, especially because it's, a huge thing that people follow. And that's where these, like, they come out with these just so flippantly, where the responsibility, politics did not cause this. It's very clear to see this guy was unstable, yet this guy tweets out something that basically incites violence. Like, he's saying, like, this is what's going to happen. And that to me is, like, incredible. And then we have this lady, Jennifer Rubin. I'm not exactly sure who she is, but I love Charles Cook because he replied to her on this. But she says, Republicans, you know what would lower polarization and destruction of civility? Remove a prez who seems to have gone stark raving mad, which brings up the, how short was your skirt argument.
Well, and what exactly has Trump done that has incited violence? Has Trump walked out and said we should just beat the crap out of people or go shoot people up? I know he's not the most well-spoken, intelligent person on the face of the planet, but I feel like since he's taken office, he's actually said less enraging things than he did when he was on the campaign trail. So I don't understand how he gets blamed for this other than the fact that he exists causes these people to have aneurysms on a daily basis. So then that makes them feel like it's okie dokie to behave the way they do, because I think they're confusing. I think they think they're providing some sort of like rebellion Like, this is the new Civil War, and that they're on the side of good, and that they're really fighting some sort of horrible evil, and Trump just happens to be the figurehead of it. So that it's justifying their histrionics and the things that they say, like it's okay to go shoot people up or they deserved it, or, you know, that mental illness is caused by a certain president or what have you, or, you know, Elizabeth Warren saying stupid things like, wow, I really hope Republicans donate their bodies to science so we can cut them open and see what horrible things are inside. Like, you want to talk about inciting violence? Perhaps they should look at what they're saying when they're speaking to their own people.
Well, right, and you had Kathy Griffin with her Trump head, and you had the play about killing the president. Meanwhile, people were blaming Sarah Palin for having Gabby Giffords' head on a map with a target on it for, you know, it was all Sarah Palin's fault.
Was it even that wasn't even that. It was the area that Gabby Giffords happened to be on had crosshair, like pictures of crosshairs on it, and said it needed to be targeted, but Gabby Giffords was nowhere to be seen on it. So they were blaming her for the shooting, even though it was a mailer that had nothing to do with anything, and this guy had nothing to do with the Republican Party that went and shot Gabby Giffords.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, like, if we couldn't even disagree with President Obama's policies and we were racists and bigots and, you know, how dare we not kiss his ring, but they can start talking about killing people. And, you know, some people are like, well, I can understand how they're feeling so frustrated, but obviously we don't condone killing people. I'm like, what kind of response is that? Like, that's complete bullcrap. Anyway, we are at time, guys, so we got to leave it here. Next topic coming up after this break. Welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. During the break, we actually decided we wanted to continue our previous topic. So, Courtney, do you want to get back into it?
So, another quick point I wanted to bring up was how the left is expecting us the right to just roll over on Second Amendment rights, and that they're aghast that we're not called to arms to disarm. And the presumption is, the only reason why we hate gun violence is because it's happening, or we don't hate it, is because it's happening to someone else. And now that it's happened to us, well, of course, we're going to hate it now. But freedom is so much bigger than that. And so that was just really, I thought it was kind of funny that they were confused that we weren't ready to roll over on that.
Well, there was a tweet that I saw shortly after this happened, and I don't know who this person is. I think her name is I can't say it. Alana Mastrongello. And it could be completely wrong. I'm assuming it's Italian. I'm German. Sorry. Anyway, she said that, and now liberals are trying to make the Steve Scalise shooting into a gun issue. No, you don't get to shoot us and then demand to disarm us. And I agree with that. I don't know why people's first thought is, well, we have to take away the guns because there might be some crazy people with it. And I'm like, okay, but why do you get to take away my gun when I've never been crazy with mine? I've never shot anybody up. I have no intention of doing that, and I would prefer to have it so that I can defend myself from the crazy people who get guns even when they're not supposed to. Because how many times does it happen that it's someone who shouldn't have had a gun in the first place? They're legally unable to have one.
Well, and I was on Twitchy the other day, and I guess Jenna Jameson had to point out to someone, because he was like, well, if we had stricter gun control, and she was like, he was from Illinois.
Right.
Where there's the strictest gun laws in the country. So,
yeah.
You know, obviously your gun control really works.
Oh, yeah, it's fabulous.
So the last point that I wanted to bring up was Sally Cohn. Yay, our favorite person ever, right?
She's literally the worst.
She had a tweet basically that was saying, and I have to find it eventually, but she had a tweet that said, that basically she's sad that this happened, but she does really feel that the right in general is more hateful, more violent, blah, blah, blah. And this is really interesting to me because on the right, you have people who are fighting for pro-life, okay? You have people who are fighting against the right to die. You have people who are constantly trying to get people to understand the value of a human life, that is more important than anything else, and that we should hold it dear. And then you have the left who is like, well, you should be able to die whenever you want to. You should be able to kill babies whenever you want to. And beyond that, though, the culture is that they pretend to be tolerant and they pretend to love everyone around them. But the truth is that if anybody looks different than them and if they can make fun of them, then that is what they do. And it's the hypocrisy is what gets me the worst. And I guess that leads into your story, Jana, about what happened with Barron Trump and how they're treating him, even though he's being completely normal right now. So
yeah, well, yeah, it does go to prove that progressives are very do as I say, not as I do, because they do tend to let conservatives and other people who think like conservatives know that their opinions are unwanted on most things and that they're wrong about everything and they really are the scum of the earth, and yet they turn around and are perfectly willing to attack someone who is not only a minor, he's 11 years old, but just happens to be in the public eye because of his dad. And this is a topic that tends to irritate me a lot because it seems to happen to conservative kids a lot. We've seen it with the Cruz children. When Ted Cruz was running for president, there were several instances where his children were used as political fodder. We've seen it with other conservative candidates and congressmen's children. That apparently they're not off limits, but the second you say something about, let's say, Sasha and Malia Obama, you are racist scum and you should forever be, like imprisoned or something for saying something mean. So there is a double standard, and it is pretty ugly because there was a story that was released earlier this week. This was prior to the shooting, so I think probably has gotten lost in the mess that is that. But Melania Trump and Barron Trump just moved into the White House in this past week. They were waiting for Barron to finish up the school year before moving him to the White House, which, although I understand what people were saying about paying, extra tax dollars for their protection, I think it's not unreasonable that they wanted to give him an opportunity to finish out his school year where he was and let him have at least whatever normalcy he might have just being who he is. When Air Force One brought Melania and Barron to the White House, it was noted that when Barron left the plane, he was playing with a fidget spinner. If you don't know what that is, God bless you. They are the bane of everyone's existence, and I'm super glad that I work in a preschool, so that's not something that has made its way to us yet, but it's essentially a toy that was intended as sort of a therapeutic tool for kids with ADD, ADHD, or some form of attention issues for class. It's supposed to keep their fingers busy, keeps them. It's a fidget toy, essentially, keeps the kids focused on stuff, so that they're not losing track of what they're doing in class. So it was being prescribed as a tool for kids, and then, of course, as most things do, as soon as one kid has it, all of the kids have it. So it's an annoying little thing. It's turning into a thing. Everybody wants one. They're everywhere now. And Barron Trump has one. He probably has several, but he has at least one. And he was playing with it on the way out of the plane, and apparently that gave the left the right to say that he was retarded.
Okay, so I freaking hate this word, and it's because I have sat with kids on the floor after being bullied because, I work with kids with autism. I have a certification in occupational therapy. So, I work with special needs kids, and I had a kiddo sit on the floor with me, and he was bawling, like, just so upset. And he said, "Why do they keep calling me retarded?"
Oh,
so I will go after anyone who uses this word. I don't like it. I don't want to hear it. And I especially hate when people will say, I don't mean those people. Because I'm like, well, where did you get your reference point from?
Yeah, because that certainly makes it better. He's like,
I know. Like,
way to segregate it more. Be like,
yeah,
okay, he's retarded, but not those retards. Like, that's how I feel like that's just what they're saying. So I don't particularly care for it either. I'm not one for censoring speech. If people want to say it, I will call them out for being stupid, but obviously they have the right to say it and just make themselves look like idiots. But the point is that there are no lines the progressive left will not cross when it comes to a conservative, and especially one they really don't like. This kid is 11 years old, okay? He is in the spotlight because of his father, has actually, I think, managed for most of those 11 years, managed to stay out of the spotlight until his father became president of the United States, which is funny considering his family has kind of always been, out there. I think everybody knows who the Trumps are. If you don't, I don't know where you've been, but welcome to the club. So
in Blake.
Right. So I feel like he's managed to stay out of the spotlight up until this point. So now, because his dad is particularly hated by the progressive left, that gives them, I guess, permission to go after him and call him names and make assumptions. And and here's the thing, this is not the first time someone has suggested that there's something wrong with this kid. Rosie O'Donnell went out of her way not long ago to suggest that he had autism, even though there has been no indication from him or anything. There's been no evidence that even is something that should have crossed her mind, other than she hates his dad and he thinks he probably thinks it's genetic. I don't know. She suggested that he was, and that he should be tested for it. So now people are latching onto that and using that as an excuse to make fun of this kid. Kathy Griffin has said on several occasions before she ruined her own career with the whole Donald Trump head thing, that she will happily go after Barron Trump because he's, one, a boy, and two, he's a Trump. So she thinks he's fair game, even though he's 11 years old and can't fight back. So that just goes to show not only that these people will not have a single line that they're unwilling to cross, they also don't seem to understand what morals are, that they are so spineless that the only way that they can get their jollies off and make themselves feel better is to make fun of a kid. So I'm disgusted with it as someone who works with kids, and I just, I'm no fan of Trump, but that's not a line you cross. You do not go after someone's kids. I mean,
you guys, do you remember the Sarah Palin Family Guy went after her son with Down syndrome?
Yep.
Repeatedly, people would talk about raping her daughters. So it's not like we shouldn't have expected this. Like, expecting them to behave better is probably our bad, because they have no control. They don't think that their words hurt us, yet our words can cause them to kill themselves,
Right.
So, well, and real quick too, why is Down syndrome a bad thing? Like, if you're tolerant, if you're loving, if you're all inclusive, why would Down syndrome be an issue at all? Why would autism be an issue at all? So that's the other frustrating thing for me. It's not just the hypocrisy, it's the double hypocrisy when you're like, it's autism. It can be an issue for people
because it's something to be pitied, Courtney. That's what it is. These people don't look at it as something, as someone can live with it. Yeah, I mean, does anybody really want to be born with Down syndrome? Probably not. But if they are, does that mean that's the end of their life, or that they're completely incapable of becoming something more than their diagnosis? Obviously, I think conservatives believe that because we're for life and we'll take what we've got, even if it's a short time, or if they've got a disease that's going to affect their life, we'll take it. Whereas liberals, progressives, people who are all about abortion, look at it as something to be pitied. That it's not about the child that you've created and that you're going to raise and give the best life that you can. It's about, they've got Down syndrome. They've got an extra chromosome. They've got autism. Things are going to be too hard for them. They're never going to be able to amount to anything because of this disease. That is how they're looking at it. They see the disease and not the person.
It's a false compassion. And
the disease or the condition, or whatever you want to call it. I know that Down syndrome is not a disease, but it's a, it's a condition. So It just is.
Well, but they look at diseased people like that too. Like, oh, you're this way. Oh, you poor thing. Where I had a friend who, sorry, real quick note. I had a friend who was in a wheelchair. He had a spinal cord injury when he was younger. He was completely unable to walk. And I remember that there was one time when he had used the bathroom and he had a colonoscopy bag, I think it is. So, I can't remember. But anyway, I was literally confused why that thing was in there because I would forget that he was even in a wheelchair. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but when you see people as people and who they are, you forget and you don't see the disabilities and you don't even see them as disabilities. You're just like, oh, this is who you are, whatever. But on the left, it's a false compassion.
I mean, we are constantly told that we are like cavemen and we can't evolve, but we adapt and we accept people as they are, yet we are the intolerant ones. We're the ones who are terrible. Ladies, we got to leave it there. We are at time. So we're coming back with a constitutorial.
All right.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. We are back for our constitutorial, and I'm going to attempt to tackle all of Article 3. It is laying out the guidelines for the judicial branch, so it's really not that in-depth, just because there are other articles and other amendments that were added to kind of put everything together for us, give us a better picture of what the Supreme Court is supposed to look like. So in Section 1, it states that there will be a Supreme Court, but it didn't specify beyond that what it would look like. Basically just said the Congress is the one that's going to set it up. So in 1789, Congress passed the Judiciary Act, which set up the federal district and appeals court system. And they set up our court system to be kind of like a pyramid. So you start at the bottom and you move up as you appeal. Technically, they didn't say how many Supreme Court justices we were supposed to have. And so when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to add to our Supreme Court, it was technically constitutional because there's really no stipulations. So it specifies that all judges will hold their positions as long as they exercise, quote, good behavior, and that a judge's wages cannot be diminished. And so their rationale for this was that if it's a lifelong term, then it won't sway depending on the opinions of the masses. It would put a little bit of balance into our system so that, you know, if somebody was like, hey, I don't want gay marriage passed, one judge would see that case as well as see a case on, I don't even know, I can't think, like healthcare, okay? So they didn't want the judges changing with the whims of society, basically. And they also said that their wages can never be diminished. So you can't use that as a threat to be like, oh, you better vote for this or we're going to dock your pay next cycle or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But I feel like, okay, yeah, this makes kind of sense to me. But judges roll from the bench and rule with the whims of society more and more these days, you know? And so for me, I think that there should be term limits on judges because this isn't just Supreme Court justices, this is all judges. So I just feel like, maybe there should be some limits on that, on how long they can serve, because obviously we're already sick of our congressmen who just plant their butts and stay there for life, even though technically we can quote unquote vote them out. Nobody ever does. So I don't know. Maybe that's just why my attitude is like that. But what do you guys think?
I don't think anybody should have a life. Okay, you know what, Courtney? My opinion is obviously more important than yours right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Just kidding, but really. Anyway, I don't think anybody should have a lifetime position in anything. I am a huge believer in term limits. I think that should apply for anybody in government, especially now that we have reached the level that we're at with like technology and ability. I think it was probably easier back in the day not to sway a judge's opinion because there wasn't as much technology or access to 24/7 news and people having access to them. So I just feel like where we're at now, people should have limits. And as Sammy pointed out as we were preparing for this, people live longer. So judges that were probably going to be dead by the age of 55 or 60 or even before then are now living to be Ruth Bader Ginsburg age. Where it's probably time.
Or she's nodding off during proceedings.
Exactly. I mean, if you were falling asleep at your desk, it's probably time to put in for retirement. I'm not going to lie. I mean, okay, fine. You've done some things in your life. That's fine. No one is going to blame you for saying, you know what? I'm 80-some years old. It might be time.
I don't think that I think they should be lifetime appointments. I do, however, think they should be longer terms, so that it can bring balance. But I think that if you have a definite time where, it's up, not just like a death on the board that brings a new blood in, I think that, if you have a specific limit, like, this is a 20-year appointment, let's just say, because whatever, it helps encourage you to be mentoring people. So you would get people like the Scalia and those guys who are mentoring, knowing that those guys could take their job, instead of going, well, I don't really plan on dying for the next 40 years, so what's the rush trying to find someone who's going to take my place? So I think that not a yes to lifetime employment, but a yes to longer term employment, just to kind of make sure that life isn't so hectic whenever there is an election.
Right. I think, I don't know. I just know that Obama packed as many of the courts as he could before he left. So it's become political, and so it's not like there are these unbiased, wise old men who are sitting there looking down on us to kind of, balance out some of the more unruly people. They're just as unruly themselves.
It's less about the Constitution and more about who's going to vote our way.
And that brings me to section 2. Did you know that nowhere in the Constitution did it state that the job of the Supreme Court was to rule on constitutionality of laws? That was put into place by Madison versus Marbury, that established judicial review. So
that is very interesting. I did not know that.
Initially, they just said that the Supreme Court, they laid out different types of court cases that they would hear, but that wasn't initially one of them. And now it's basically the only one we all know and care about, because we bring all of our grievances to them in the last 8 years because Obama did a lot of unconstitutional things. So I thought that was really interesting.
You're crazy. He did nothing unconstitutional. The pen and the phone are completely constitutional.
There weren't really phones back then, so I don't know that it's constitutional. And then just finishing it up, because I'm almost out of time, guys. The section 3 is on treason, and it defines exactly what treason is. So it says treason against the United States shall consist only of levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And it also says that no person shall be convicted of treason unless the testimony of 2 witnesses of the same act or a confession in open court. And then they also made it where you cannot punish the family of a traitor. You can only punish the traitor themselves. And I'm right on time, guys. I'm sorry. I don't have any time to respond. But that is our constitutorial for this week. Coming up and ring the bell. Welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. It's time to ring the bell. Okay, so it's been a minute since our last poll because we took a break last week. So I'm going to try and catch you up with our poll and try not to lose you. So last time, Gina's topic was about the government charging kids who want to mow lawns. And 100% of you agreed that it was total government overreach, which is not shocking because it is. And then I talked about Kathy Griffin and her idiotness, which we had over 200 votes in this poll, guys. I don't know how we worked that out.
One of our most popular.
83% said, duh, it's her fault. 11% said that people were too hard on her. 6% of people said it was Trump's fault. And we also got called Jew haters.
Which, yeah, I was like,
I don't even know.
Wow, they really pegged us. We should probably make sure that's in our Twitter bio because they called that one.
Jew haters just like Ava Brown, you know?
I was online when this argument started, and this person was a crazy. Like, we did not respond to a single thing I put towards them, and just went straight for the you hate women, you're not holding to the same standards for anybody else, like brought up Ted Nugent, and I'm like, what the hell does Ted Nugent have to do with friggin' Kathy Griffin? And then the second I asked that, immediately we became Jew haters, and then we're blocked like shortly after that. So I'm like, cool.
I know, I was laughing so hard. I'm like, okay. Whatever. Okay, and then Courtney's topic was on the We Rate Dogs page, who decided to give their proceeds to Planned Parenthood instead of a dog organization. 86% of you already unfollowed them before you took our poll. 10% were considering it, and 4% were like, nah, I just like looking at dogs. Which I
found better dog sites to follow, just so you know. I put the call out and people responded, and I have so I got rid of We Rate Dogs, and now I follow 4 other accounts that are dogs, and they're adorable still.
I believe one of them on Twitter is We Love Dogs USA. Who kindly did us a follow after this whole thing went down. So if you guys would like to follow them, they've got some pretty adorable dog pictures and have specifically said, we are not doing ourselves a political. So
yeah. So that catches you up on the polls from last week, or week before last. Now I'm lost. We have some new topics, and Jana's going to kick it off for us.
Okay, well, I recognize that last week I talked about city government overreach, and I've managed to find some more, because that's just how I do, I guess. And I'm also really good at finding things that happened 2 years ago, but suddenly got in the news again and seemed like it was yesterday. Apparently, there was a gentleman, his name is Mike Steele. He posted a Facebook video in October of 2015, which I didn't realize until I shared the post and was like, what? So now, essentially what happened was he and his family and friends were barbecuing in his backyard. Let me repeat this. His backyard, as in his property. He was barbecuing for his family when a city ordinance worker showed up on his doorstep and told him that he needs to find a way to keep the smell of his barbecue from wafting into anybody else's yard. As if anybody on this planet has the capability of doing that. So
I was going to say, I want to know who can contain smells, because I have some bad smells in my house that I would like someone to contain.
Right. And I'm just like, do we think this guy is Zeus and just can control the weather and keep the air from just flowing into somebody else's yard? It sounds like this is some crazy old lady that just was looking for something to complain about. But the guy was adamant about reading the specific ordinance about keeping things on your property, and it just didn't make any sense. And this is not my first rodeo with city ordinances being out of control. I dealt with this a couple years ago myself. I have an insane and drunken neighbor who lives across the alley from me who desperately hates me because, one, I have told him I don't like him, and two, he offered my father a beer at 8 o'clock in the morning and it was turned down, and apparently that's sacrilegious when you're a drunk. Anyway, he does not like me, so anytime my dogs have ever barked or I guess have just breathed, has made a big point of telling me I need to shut them up. I got a letter in the mail shortly after an incident we had where he had called the cops on my dogs even though they were not outside at the time. And I was told that I had violated an animal noise ordinance code of the city of Cedar Rapids. And because the police had shown up at my door when I was not home, knocked on said door, and incited my dogs to barking, I was in violation of this code, even though my dogs were inside their own house. So I know how this goes, and I can't even tell you, like, my brain is going to explode at how stupid some of these ordinances are.
Yay, government. Well, my ring the bell this week has to do with a Judge Judy video that's gone a little bit viral. So these two people are in court over custody of their kids, and the woman was like just so confident she was going to get her kids. And Judge Judy said, I hate to break it to you, honey, but dads are not second-rate citizens. And since it's Father's Day, I thought I would share the story just because the girl responded to Judge Judy, well, that's not what I've been told.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay. Some women are terrible mothers and do not deserve to have their kids. And yes, there are some dads who are deadbeats, but the ones who are actually there and are fighting for their kids are not the ones that should be called out, you know? And I just want to say this. If you are going to do anything Father's Day related this weekend, awesome. And if you're going to complain and say, well, there are some single moms who play both roles, you didn't let any dads get any credit who play both roles on Mother's Day.
Mother's Day was in May. Time to move on, princess.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, I mean, we have issues with this at some of the places that I've worked. They're like, well, some kids don't have dads, so we don't want to make them feel bad. I'm like, you know what? That does not negate that dads deserve recognition. The ones who do stay especially deserve it.
And do the kids that do have dads, do they have to feel bad that their father decided to be a man and stick around and be in their life? I mean, really, it just disturbs me that we even have to have this conversation. I'm sorry. Just get over it.
Well, and I'm just going to add this. When I signed into Skype just today, Skype had sent me a quote-unquote card, and it was like, dads matter too. I'm like, you could have just left it at dads matter. Like, yeah, like you have to remind someone, like, oh, hey, there's this dad over here. We should give him a high five every now and then. Like, no, they matter every day of a kid's life. And when their absence is there, that's when it's felt the most strongly because there's obviously issues. So that's my ring the bell. And happy Father's Day to my dad. I'm a dad. I'm a total daddy.
And also mine, because I like my dad too, and I don't want him to be left out.
Speaking speaking of fathers, my ring a bell real quick is just basically about a couple who is fighting to not have the plug pulled on their child who is fighting for life. And I think that's a very terrible, terrible position to be put in, stressful. And I don't understand why life is valued so little that we put a price tag on it and we literally say this child is not worth saving. And these parents, father included, because fathers matter, I guess, sometimes, are going there. They have to go to court to basically get a stay of execution for their child to be able to live. And I don't get that. Like, I don't. So the more we have this culture of death, I've talked about it before, but I mean, it really is like, if you value life completely, then you fight for it. And even if that child lives a week or 20 years, it's a life. And the more we embrace the culture that says that we can just terminate life because it's not doing anything for me specifically, then we're going to end up with a lot more of these cases where parents who love and adore and want their child to have every chance that they can have will be told by the government, no, that doesn't work for me.
Well, and I just want to add too, this is every parent's nightmare in countries that have socialized medicine, Yeah. And we're told, oh, that will never happen. That will never happen. That doesn't happen. That's just hyperbole. That's just someone trying to scare you from this great thing. And it's happening, and this is a nightmare. Oh my God. I just watched, I did watch the whole series and oh my gosh. Yeah, I could say something. Maybe I'll save that for someday. So yeah, we'll have some new polls for you guys to vote on Twitter when we have our Twitter party, our podcast party. I did want to quickly tell people, so I know I've told y'all that I'm a military spouse, and we've been told that we are moving in 20 days. So if you don't hear me next week, our friend and fellow Belle Rocky is going to fill in for me. So if you don't hear from me, I'm probably not dead, but there's no guarantee.
We'll let you all know when she passes on. It's all good. It's all good.
Please clap. Come to my funeral. Please clap.
Okay, yeah, well, I think that's all we have for tonight, possibly. I don't know. But if you are interested in following us on social media, you can find us at Bells of Liberty on Twitter, at The Bells of Liberty on Facebook. As Amy mentioned, we do have podcast parties when our latest show drops on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. Oh, wait, no, that's backwards. 5 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. No. Wait,
no.
Holy crap, guys. Whoa. Whoa.
5 p.m. Central.
5 p.m. Central. 6 p.m.
Pacific.
Okay, what she said. It's like this is all new. I've never done this show before. Anyway, it does drop at some point on Saturday. And you can join us on Twitter for a podcast party where we post our polls. You guys can give your opinions. You can chat with us. We can get a little bit more in depth about the things we talked about. We tend to have a lot of gift storms because we like to use gifts in our tweets. It's a lot of fun. So join us there. You can find all of our previous shows on Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play Music. So if you've missed any of our shows, you can go back and listen to them. And again, you can join us for our fun times on Saturdays. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Bells of Liberty podcast. Want to listen to more sassy content? All shows are available free on demand on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Google Play Music. Have something to say? You can find us on Twitter at Bells of Liberty, and also on Facebook, www.facebook.com/The Bells of Liberty. And as always, keep calm and ring on.